Hey family, want to talk about migration patterns today, historical migration patterns, not what people have had access to do, I would say maybe since the middle of the last century, like maybe 1940s or so, especially 1970s. But historically, how people moved around and how sorry, I'm not in my usual spot. I've done a video here before, but I was completely alone except for the baby. So I don't have as much privacy, but it's still kind of private. Baby's not asleep, but he's corralled, but he's still moving around. So we'll see how this goes. I'm gonna start with my family as an example. If you've seen my other videos, it's probably like a dozen or so by now. But I've touched on how people moved and migrated, but just for like a review, as an example for other people. If people are like, if you're living on the East Coast or even the Gulf Coast, the narrative we've been taught might make more sense, but you got a lot of people who are copper colored, who live in like the interior part of these present day United States. And if you cannot find your family's migration pattern, whether that's through vital statistics like birth, death, marriage, divorce, or census records. Census records are good for kind of seeing where people were every 10 years. Yeah, if you've known your people have always been in Ohio since forever, I mean, yeah, you could probably say, river travel, but like how common was that? How often did that happen? So my family, father's side, again, I can't go past my paternal grandfather, but I know he was born in Greenville, Mississippi, and he died in Greenville, Mississippi. My paternal grandmother, born in Greenville, Mississippi. She did move to Memphis at one point. She lived in Memphis, but then she died in Greenville. She moved back to Greenville. She died there. Her father, my great-grandfather, Papa Austin, he was born in Arkansas, just across the river from Greenville. So like if you see it on the map, I think it's Glen Allen, Arkansas. It's just across the river from Greenville. But I think that, and I didn't look into it before and I haven't been on Ancestry.com in like, I would say 2019. I didn't do any research beginning 2020, again, because I was pregnant, and it was the year of the thing. And just all my energy just went towards a healthy pregnancy. So 2019 is probably the last time I did research. And for whatever reason, I didn't think to look for Papa Austin's mother's family in Arkansas. I just kept focused on Mississippi. But I think her people were, hey family. Yeah, it's 3 days later. We're in the same shirt. I might be wearing different pants. They might be the same pants. But yeah, so great-great-grandmother, Dolly Taylor, I suspect her people were in Arkansas. That's why she gave birth to my great-grandfather, Papa Austin, there. But then they both came right back across the river. His World War I conscription record said he was in Skipwith, and there are some census records that says he was in Skipwith, Mississippi, before he was drafted, before he went to France for World War I. And hope they're okay. And after he got back from the war, he moved to Greenville. But if you look at those 3 locations, Glen Allen, Arkansas, Skipworth, Mississippi, Greenville, Mississippi, they're really close to each other. Then my mother's father's side, they're from Sugarlock, Mississippi, and not everyone made the move from Sugarlock to East St. Louis. But my great-grandparents, they made the move. There were a lot of families. There's a huge Sugarlock contingent in East St. Louis. And people always talk about how small the town is, but there are so many people who had people come up from Sugarlock. So a lot of those families, they knew each other, they married each other, but that was their big move. And that was, there was one census record I found of my great-grandparents when they were pretty newly married. They were still in Sugarlock, that first census record. And then the subsequent census record, they were in East St. Louis. Keeping that third eye on my baby. But he's doing all right. So I know that my grandfather was a child when they moved, but I don't know what year. And then to those census records, I would have to be looking at them to know what year was the Sugarlock year and then what year was in East St. Louis. But that was, in the 1900s. Then on my mother's side, you've got the one set of family. My great-great-grandmother, Grandma Minnie, she was born in Paducah, Kentucky. And as a child, went across the Ohio River to Metropolis, Illinois. If you look at those 2 cities, Paducah and Metropolis, it's right across the river. It's not geographically, probably personally and lifestyle-wise, it was big, but I'm talking like geographical changes in location. It's just across the river. It's not that big of a move. Then I've got the other Kentucky family, her eventual husband. Those third great-grandparents and fourth great-grandparents were still in central Kentucky in the 1870 census. But in 1871 was when my great-great-grandfather was born. So they probably moved really quickly after that census was taken. He was born in Metropolis, and he was the first of like 3 or 4 generations born in Metropolis, Illinois. So that move from central Kentucky to Metropolis, Illinois was probably kind of big, moderately big, but again, it's just, not that far, just across the river. Then the Tennessee side, 1870 census had my great-great-grandfather and his parents, the one that my son's named after. They were in central Tennessee. My great-great-grandmother was not his first wife. So I found both of his marriage records. And I don't remember. I would have to look again. I know that my great-great-grandparents, they were in western Tennessee when they got married. His first wife, I'm not sure if he was still central or if he had already moved west, but he was a younger man. He was like 21, 22, and she was a year or so younger than him. But then my great-great-grandmother, she was about 12 years younger. But that was definitely western Tennessee. And then they eventually moved to Metropolis, Illinois. So that's kind of how everyone on my mom's side met. They all kind of met in Metropolis. And then as a big family, there was the move from Metropolis, Illinois to East St. Louis. But listen to the years, I'm saying all this to point out that the big moves were made well into the 1900s. And, you know, they were done as like families. You do have my mother's father, who, you know, you could say he made another big move when he came up to Chicago, you know, to work for that family in Highland Park, and then subsequent business attempts after that. And then my mom, you know, came up with him some years in, some years she was still in East St. Louis with my aunts. But yeah, the big moves were not until the 1900s. So I know, I mean, there's going to be those cases where like maybe people were on the Atlantic coast and then they just, you know, maybe possibly took the coast into the Gulf Coast and ended up in the Gulf states. But like, how many was that? And if people aren't looking, you're just never going to know. But you have to really look. You have to know who left where to end up in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and who was already there. Like, you've got so many. Like, I lived in Texas for 4 years. There's a lot of black people in Texas. Some are transplants. There's a lot of transplants in Texas. But you got people who have always been there, and they're assumed they were brought from Africa. Which, yes, that's going to be true for some, but not all. And you've got people thinking that all came from Africa. And yeah. And then you did have, you know, the invention of the cotton gin. And you had that other great migration, like when tobacco just stopped being the sexy crop and cotton became the sexy crop and everybody wanted sugar. People did, well, the owners, the plant, you know, the growers, the enslavers, speculators, not all of them held people. Not all of them enslaved people. You might have had some single men trying to make a quick buck. So they make the big move from Atlantic coast to Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. But you did have some enslavers move their entire families and property, including human property. Some of them did make that big move from Atlantic coast down to the cotton growing states. But how many? Yeah, so I mean, there's all these questions. There's so many unanswered questions. Like, if you start really thinking critically, and I'm always going to give props to Dane Calloway for bringing it up, because like every time he does a video, then I get questions. Like, you know, what about this one and what about that one? Which inspired a lot of these videos. So, yeah. Yeah. So if anybody, you know, like I said, just friendly reminder, whoever wants to troll, mama ain't got time. But yeah, just people in general. You know, there are always going to be those instances that I just named. The cotton gin migration, Atlantic coast to Gulf state migration. But I mean, that's not, I wouldn't even call that a migration. Maybe just somebody said, go east, and then they found land, probably for cheaper, Gulf Coast. But more people, I mean, really, more people need to start looking, you know, instead, I mean, because even if you believe that, or even if you know that you had people come over from Africa, trace it, back it up, you know, do your research on your family and back it up, because that's what I'm doing. And I don't know if I said this in the other video, but I was just telling my husband the other day, my mom remembers her great-grandfather, Grandpa Stalls, And she remembered him being very dark. You know, she said he was so dark he must have been African. And then I told her, well, I found his parents and they were born in Central Tennessee. So if they were African, it wasn't that generation. And now I'm like, if his mom was born in 1829 and the ships were banned in 1808, if she was African, it was some generations to go from the Atlantic coast to Central Tennessee. People did not make those big moves like that. They just didn't. Like, how many Atlantic coast to Tennessee moves were there? I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm saying not that many. And again, this is my family. I don't think there was a big move from 1808 to 1829 from Atlantic coast to Central Tennessee. That's my ancestral instinct is telling me that. If it's different for your family, I mean, if you're going to come and argue, don't argue history books. Argue what you found for your family. Because people didn't move like that. They did not. They could not. Horses and buggies. Have y'all seen 1883? I mean, I know it's going to be some Yellowstone fans, but if you've seen 1883, it was hard. That was hard. Moving was hard, so people didn't move. You know, if they lost money on tobacco, then they just lost money on tobacco. But you had to have money to move to Mississippi, and money just wasn't rolling and flowing like that. It was going to be very specific, already wealthy families who could even afford to. You got to feed those people. You got a 300 slave plantation. You can't have them down to starvation. You can't. You cannot do that. These big moves didn't happen. Like, not in those numbers. So I don't know what else to say about that. But yeah, that's my take on migration. Yeah, that's my take. Basically saying a lot of us were already here because, yeah, we were already here, y'all. And I don't know, like, which paperwork was burned, what's being locked under key, but yeah. You know, you hear the stories about at one point black people outnumbered whites, 4-1 or something like that. In you know, the deep South, we like outnumbered white people 4-1 at one point, and that's why they said that the Second Amendment didn't apply to us. But yeah, a lot of it was, you know, a lot of it was reproduction. You know, people just made more babies, but a lot of us were already here, and I don't know. That's what my research and my paperwork is telling me. So when I get some more disposable income to, you know, go deeper into my research to see if I can get more records. Not all of them are 1870, because a lot of my great grandparents that I'm stuck on were born in like the 1880s or 1870s, and they wouldn't have been in the 1870 census. But yeah, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna figure it out. But that's what my instinct is telling me. You know, it's not like a cerebral brain instinct. It's what my heart and soul is telling me from what I found. And when you start uncovering things in your research, there's some things, like when I told you I had to stop that first year because my heart was broken, it's gonna shake you. It's gonna shake your soul when you start finding things. Some things are gonna shake your soul in a good, happy, positive way. Like when you find that set that extra set of great grandparents, like the parents of it's gonna do some really good stuff for you, but you're gonna find some stuff that's gonna break your heart and shatter your soul. And yeah, so if my ancestral instinct is telling me my people were already here, that's what I'm going with, and that's what I'm gonna believe, and that's what I'm gonna stick with. And show me paperwork to show me I'm wrong, but I got the paperwork telling me what it's telling me. So with that, yeah, I got a few. I'm coming down to like just the last few ideas that I had. So yeah, I'm thinking I might only have like 3 more of these before I gotta start getting some more research done. So with that, I'm gonna sign off for now. And yeah, and then start gathering my ideas for the next video. So take care, y'all. Hey family, I forgot my daddy. My daddy was the big move. Yeah, born in Memphis. Yeah, there we go again. Memphis, Tennessee is not that far from Greenville, Mississippi. But my grandmother did eventually bring him back to Greenville. And yeah, protecting the baby. Yeah, and he stayed in Greenville, and I think looking at his birth certificate and his DD-214, if you military, you know what a DD-214 is. It looked like he might have been looking at joining the Navy and then found out that as soon as he turned 17, he was eligible. Because I think in May, his birthday was April 1st, and I think in May, his birth certificate was completed. Now my mother when I told my mother the story of finding his birth certificate, it looked like, okay, so this is, my mother says he might have been born in a house with a midwife, so he didn't have a birth certificate issue when he was born. So this is the story I concluded. He wanted to join the Navy. I knew he could do it at 17. Navy said you need a birth certificate. Realized he didn't have one. So he and my grandmother went to Memphis, where he was born, and completed a birth certificate. And I know this because his signature at 17 looked just the way his handwriting did as the 14 years that I knew him. So he signed his own birth certificate, and he needed that to get into the Navy. It was signed in like May of 51. Yeah. So yeah, he was born in 34. So 1951, he would have been 17. He was in the Navy 1951 and 1955, just before his 21st birthday. He was honorably discharged from the Navy. But after he got, the Navy, I think he did some boot camp in San Diego and then ended up serving in Pensacola. So for him, that was a big move. But once he was discharged from the Navy, he made the big move to Chicago. I know he attended the Art Institute, and I think he ended up working at the post office to support himself while going to the Art Institute. But then he ended up working at the post office for 30 years. And that's how my parents met. They met at the post office. They were a post office couple. But yeah, I left him out. So sorry, Daddy, that I left you out of the migration pattern video, but aren't y'all glad I know how to link videos now? Because this isn't 3 videos, this is one long one. So with that, take care, everybody. And 2 more moves. So yeah, my father's big move from Mississippi to Chicago was in the 50s. I'm doing motherhood right now. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to say this, because he was the oldest, but the oldest sister of his, the first of the 3 sisters, she married someone from Houston. So that was her big move. She went from Greenville to Houston when she married her second husband. And then his baby sister, Yeah, his older sister is Aunt Dolly. She's recently deceased. But Aunt Dolly was named after her mother, my grandma Dolly, who was named after her paternal grandmother. I did a naming video, so some of y'all, if you've seen the naming video, you know this story. But then his baby sister, she, and I think, yeah, and her two daughters, my cousins, they all went to Atlanta in the 90s. Soon after he passed away, they made the big move from Greenville to Atlanta in the 90s when everybody else is moving to Atlanta. So yeah, but no, I'm just establishing the pattern. Big moves did not happen in the 1800s, and a lot of them didn't really happen till the 1920s and later. So I said what I said, and I'm gonna stick with it. Big moves didn't happen. Not back then, not like that. So I think I really am done, and y'all are so glad I know how to link videos. So now instead of 4 videos, it's one long one. So yeah, take care, and see you when I come back with the next one.